It began with laughter that wasn't laughter at all, the brittle kind people used to cover cruelty. They were laughing at her son again, and she knew it before even stepping into the room. Some slur about him walking like a girl. Another jab about his dark skin in a school where privilege was as invisible as the air but as suffocating as smoke. The walls of the private academy were lined with plaques boasting diversity, yet the same mouths that praised inclusion spat poison when teachers turned away. She clenched her teeth, her heart pounding with a mother's ancient fury, but she did not rush in. She wanted to see who would stand with him, who would have the courage to treat her son as more than an easy target. Elaine Carter was not just any mother. At 48, she was the unseen hand behind a real estate empire sprawling across 3 states, though not even her closest relatives knew. She wore department store clothes, kept her hair in tight braids, and drove a 10-year-old car with a stubborn engine rattle. To her brothers and sisters, she was simply the struggling widow who had survived the wreck that killed her husband a decade earlier. To her community, she was a quiet figure who attended Sunday service and pressed folded bills into the donation basket. To her son, she was everything, though even he did not know about the $100 million sitting in her hidden trusts. She had her reasons. Money revealed the truth of people faster than any confession. She had watched her own cousins, her own church members, warp into something unrecognizable when wealth entered the picture. Respect became conditional, affection bought and sold. Elaine wanted none of it. She wanted to know who would love her when they thought she had nothing. But now the test she had crafted with such care was colliding with something she had not planned for. Her son's courage. Marcus was 16, tall but narrow-shouldered, with the kind of thoughtful gaze that seemed too heavy for a boy his age. For months she had sensed something swelling inside him, words he rehearsed but swallowed back. Looks he gave that lingered a second too long on the wrong people in the wrong places. When he finally told her, his hands trembled so violently she thought he might shatter. "Mom, I like boys," he whispered, like it was a sin, a confession, a crime. Her chest cracked wide open, not because of what he said she had suspected but because of the terror in his eyes. She held him, kissed his forehead, told him he was perfect, and meant every word. But the storm that followed stretched beyond what either of them could have braced for. The Carters were a sprawling family, with cousins who believed Sunday sermons gave them license to judge, and uncles who masked their bitterness with talk of tradition. It began at a barbecue when Marcus, flushed with new freedom, dared to mention the name of the boy he liked. Silence fell first. Then laughter, the same brittle kind Elaine had heard at the school. Only this time it came from her blood. "You're joking," one cousin said, chuckling as if he could laugh Marcus back into the mold. Another muttered, "That's disgusting." Too low for the elders to chastise. Her brother Thomas, the loudest of them all, slammed his beer down. "Not in this family," he barked. "Not under my roof." Elaine's hands curled into fists beneath the picnic table. She wanted to scream the truth, to strip away their arrogance with the weight of her hidden fortune. She could have silenced them in a second by reminding them she could buy and sell every piece of land they clung to. But she said nothing. She watched her son's face pale, watched the boy's light flicker like a candle pressed to the wind. Later that night, Marcus shut his bedroom door and did not come out. Elaine stood outside, torn. She thought of the $100 million, thought of the test she had set, thought of how meaningless it all seemed in the face of her son's tears. Respect without money was a noble pursuit, but respect without love? What good was any of it if her child was drowning? She leaned her forehead against the door. "Marcus," she whispered, "I've got you. No matter what they say, I've got you." But promises whispered through wood felt paper thin when morning came and the world sharpened its knives again. At school, the whispers spread faster than she imagined. Boys bumped his shoulder in the hallway. Girls snickered when he passed. Someone scrawled a slur across his locker in thick black marker. Elaine cleaned it herself before he saw, scrubbing until her knuckles ached. But he already knew. She saw it in the way he moved, hunched and quiet, a boy shrinking from the world. She wanted to unleash her wealth then, to buy the school, fire the cowards, raise a banner so high it silenced every voice that dared hurt her child. But again, she stopped herself. Because if money solved this, what would it prove? That they respected him because of her fortune, not because of who he was. The dilemma gnawed at her. Days bled into weeks. Marcus grew quieter. Elaine sat at the kitchen table every night, hands folded, staring at the peeling wallpaper she never bothered to replace, because appearances had always been part of her shield. She thought about her husband, dead too young, who had sworn they would raise Marcus to be brave in a world that didn't want him to exist. She thought about her parents, who had scrubbed floors so she could study, who had told her dignity mattered more than gold. And she thought about the bank accounts she never touched, the towers she owned but never claimed, the empire she kept in shadow. When Marcus finally broke, it wasn't with words but with silence. She found him sitting on the porch steps at dawn, staring at nothing. His shoulders shook, but no sound came out. "Talk to me," she begged. He shook his head. "Marcus, please. You don't have to carry this alone." He lifted his eyes, red and hollow. "Why do they hate me?" Her throat closed. 1,000 answers rushed in fear, ignorance, envy, but none would save him. She pulled him into her arms. "Because they don't know love the way you do. And that makes them smaller, not you." It wasn't enough. She knew it. The breaking point came at another family gathering, this time at church. The pastor thundered about sin from the pulpit, his voice shaking the rafters. Elaine watched the congregation nod, amen after amen, as Marcus sank lower into the pew. She could not bear it. Not this time. She stood. The room went still. Her voice trembled, but she forced it louder. "You speak of sin. But tell me, what is the greater sin, loving someone with your whole heart, or teaching your children to hate?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. The pastor glared, but she did not stop. "My son is gay," she said, her voice breaking but steady. "And if that offends you, then maybe it's not him who needs saving." The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. Marcus stared at her, eyes wide. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders lifted, just slightly, as if he could breathe. But the backlash was swift. That night, relatives called her reckless. Friends whispered that she had embarrassed the family. Thomas showed up at her door, veins bulging in his neck, accusing her of poisoning Marcus's mind. "You let him be weak," he spat. "You're ruining him." Elaine stood in the doorway, blocking his path. Something inside her snapped. She had held her silence too long, hidden too much. She could not let her son be crushed under the weight of other people's prejudice. "You think you know strength?" she hissed. "Strength is raising a boy who can still believe in love after all this hate. Strength is surviving every door slammed in my face because of my skin and still building a future none of you can even imagine. You want to know weakness? It's hiding behind your bigotry because you're too scared to see the truth." For the first time in years, Thomas had no words. Elaine shut the door in his face. Inside, Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, trembling. "Mom," he whispered. She looked up. "What is it, baby?" His voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd choose me." Tears burned her eyes. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I will always choose you, every time. Over money, over family, over everything. You are my everything." And in that moment, she almost told him about the fortune. Almost. But the words stuck. Because she wanted him to know he mattered beyond wealth, beyond status. She wanted his worth to shine without the shadow of money. But secrets have a way of unraveling, especially the kind stitched into silence. The secret began to unravel not through a dramatic confession but through carelessness, the way a thread frays slowly before the seam bursts. Elaine had always been meticulous, every bank statement redirected, every deed tucked into safe deposit boxes, every conversation guarded. But grief and fury had a way of loosening hands, and one night, after her showdown with Thomas, she left a folder on the kitchen table. Marcus found it. He wasn't looking for secrets. He had been searching for paper to finish a history assignment when he slid the folder open. Inside were copies of property deeds, balance sheets stamped with figures that made his head spin, and letters addressed to shell companies he didn't recognize but could tell were tied to her. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone else's mail. Maybe his mother was helping with church paperwork. But the numbers tens of millions across multiple accounts were too clear. He sat frozen, the homework forgotten, as the world rearranged itself around him. When Elaine returned from locking up the house for the night, she saw him at the table, eyes wide, the folder spread out before him. Her breath caught. "Marcus," she whispered, Is this yours?" His voice was small, like he was asking about monsters under the bed. She sat down slowly, every movement deliberate. "Yes." His hands trembled as he held up a page. "All this, it's ours." She hesitated. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Rehearsed explanations, justifications, moral lessons. But none of them prepared her for his face betrayal layered with awe, fear tangled with confusion. "It's mine," she said carefully. "And yes, one day it will be yours too. But I kept it from everyone for a reason." His eyes narrowed. "You've been letting me get bullied, letting the family treat us like trash, while you have all this. Why?" The words hit her like a whip. She reached for him, but he pulled back. "Baby, I wasn't letting you suffer. I was trying to see who really loved us, who respected us without money." "Respect without money?" His laugh cracked. "They don't respect me, Mom. Not with or without it. You let me sit there while they tore me apart, while kids wrote slurs on my locker, and you had the power to change everything." "I didn't want money to change who we are," she whispered. "But maybe it could have changed how they treated me," he snapped. His voice broke, tears streaking his cheeks. "Do you know what it feels like to hate yourself because everyone else hates you? To think maybe you're wrong for even existing? And you could have done anything, but you didn't." Her throat closed. "Marcus, I wanted you to be loved for who you are, not what you have. I just wanted to not feel alone." The silence that followed was unbearable. She reached for him again, but he shoved the folder toward her, papers scattering across the table like broken glass, and ran upstairs. His door slammed so hard the frame rattled. Elaine pressed her face into her hands. For years she had believed in her test, believed that by hiding her fortune she was shielding her son from the poison of false respect. Now she wondered if she had built his cage instead. Word spread faster than she expected. Marcus hadn't told anyone, but secrets had a way of leaking when emotions boiled over. She didn't know whether he slipped in a conversation with a friend or whether Thomas snooped after their argument. But within weeks, whispers started circulating in the family. First, little things, a cousin asking if she needed help managing assets, an aunt marveling at how well she seemed to be doing for herself, then outright questions. By Thanksgiving, the mask was off. They gathered at her sister Naomi's house, the air thick with roasting turkey and suspicion. Elaine had barely set down her casserole when Naomi cornered her in the kitchen. "You've been holding out on us," Naomi hissed, eyes sharp as knives. "All these years pretending you were struggling, and the whole time you were sitting on a fortune?" Elaine stiffened. "This isn't the time." "When is the time, Elaine? After we broke our backs helping you? After Thomas gave you money for Marcus's school clothes? You let us pity you. You let us believe you were barely getting by." "I never asked for pity," Elaine snapped. Naomi's voice rose. "You lied. To all of us." The argument spilled into the dining room, drawing the whole family into its orbit. Thomas slammed his fist on the table. "I knew it. That's why you think you're better than us, raising that boy all soft. You've been sitting on money while acting like a martyr. You think money makes me better?" Elaine shot back, her voice cracking with rage. "It doesn't. But it sure as hell shows me who's only here when they think I have nothing." The room erupted. Accusations flew like arrows. Selfish, manipulative, hypocrite. Elaine stood in the middle, her chest heaving, her son at her side trembling. She wanted to scream the truth, that she had hidden the money because she loved them too much to let greed rot what little family they had left. But all she saw in their eyes was hunger. Marcus broke the chaos with a single shout. "Stop!" The room froze. His face was streaked with tears, his hands shaking. You're all so worried about money, about who has what. Do you even care about me? Do you even see me? His voice cracked. I'm gay. I'm black. I'm your family. And you treat me like I'm a curse. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elaine stepped toward him, heart shattering. Marcus, but he pulled away, his eyes wild. No. You kept your money secret to see if people respected you. Well, here's your answer. They don't respect me either way. So what's the point? He ran out before she could stop him. The sound of the door slamming echoed like a gunshot. Elaine's body trembled. She wanted to chase him, but her legs wouldn't move. Instead, she turned to her family, her voice low and dangerous. You think this is about money? It's about love. And if you can't give that to my son, then you have nothing I want. She walked out, leaving her family stunned, and into the night. Marcus was gone. For hours she searched, driving through streets slick with rain, calling his name into the dark. Panic clawed her throat. She checked the school, the park, the corner store where he sometimes bought soda. Nothing. Finally, at near midnight, she found him sitting on the swings at the old playground, soaked through, his arms wrapped around himself. She rushed to him. Marcus, please, come home. He looked up, eyes empty. Why should I? Home isn't safe. Not with them, not with anyone. Her heart cracked. She knelt in the mud, rain plastering her hair to her face. Because I'm there. Because no matter what happens, you have me. He shook his head. But you lied. You hid everything. How am I supposed to trust you when I don't even know who you are? The words sliced deep, but she forced herself to stay steady. I'm your mother. That's who I am. Every dollar I've earned, every lie I've told it was for you, to protect you. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I failed, but never doubt that I love you more than anything. He stared at her, rain streaming down his face. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, he leaned forward, letting her wrap her arms around him. I don't want money, he whispered. I just want to be loved. I just want to not feel like I'm wrong for existing. Elaine sobbed into his shoulder. You are not wrong. You are my miracle. And I swear I will never hide again. Not from you. Not from anyone. She meant it, but promises were easy in the rain. The real test would come in the light of day, when the family circled back, when the church cast its judgment, when the world reminded them of every prejudice it carried. Elaine knew the storm had only begun, and this time she would not face it with silence. The storm truly began the next morning. Elaine woke with swollen eyes and a heavy chest, but she forced herself out of bed. Marcus was still asleep, curled tightly like when he was a child, his face softened by exhaustion. She tucked the blanket around him, kissed his forehead, and whispered a silent vow, never again, never in silence. By noon, the phone was ringing off the hook. Her siblings called, demanding explanations, demanding shares, demanding apologies. She ignored everyone, but she knew hiding wouldn't last forever. The truth was out now. When Marcus finally came downstairs, his shoulders hunched and eyes guarded, she set a plate of pancakes in front of him. He poked at them without eating. Marcus, she said carefully, we don't have to decide everything today, but I want you to know we face this together. Not you alone. Not me alone. Us. He looked up, eyes searching hers. What if they never accept me? What if everyone hates me no matter what you say? No matter what you have? Her heart twisted. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Then they don't deserve you. You don't need their acceptance to exist. But you will always have mine. And one day you'll see you'll have more than that. You'll have love, the kind that stays. He swallowed hard, his fingers squeezing hers. Later that day, they went back to church. Elaine hadn't planned to, but she knew hiding would only feed the whispers. The sanctuary was full, eyes tracking them as they entered. Some faces softened with pity, others sharpened with judgment. The pastor cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't stop her when she walked straight to the pulpit. Elaine stood tall, her son at her side. Her voice carried through the stillness. I have something to say. You may not like it, but truth doesn't wait for your approval. The congregation shifted uneasily. I hid my wealth for years because I wanted to know who respected me without it. What I found instead is that too many of you don't respect me or my son at all. Not because of money, but because of fear. Because of hate. Gasps rippled. My son is gay. That doesn't make him broken. That doesn't make him wrong. What's wrong is teaching a child to hate himself because of who he loves. What's wrong is twisting scripture into a weapon instead of a shield. The pastor tried to interrupt, but Elaine raised her hand, steady and commanding. If this church cannot love my son as he is, then it has no place for us. But I will tell you this: we will not bow. We will not apologize for existing. We will not shrink so you can feel tall. She took Marcus's hand, and together they walked out. Silence followed them into the sunlight, but Marcus squeezed her hand tightly, a new strength in his grip. That night, she finally told him everything. Every account, every deed, every decision. She opened the vault of secrets she had guarded for years, laying bare the fortune she had hidden, but also the pain that drove her to hide it. She told him about the betrayals she'd seen, the greed that devoured families, the fear that money would twist him into someone he wasn't. I wanted to protect you from all of that, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. But maybe I was protecting myself too. Maybe I was afraid you wouldn't love me if you knew. Marcus shook his head, stunned. Mom, I don't care about the money. I care that you tell me the truth. I care that you don't hide from me. That's all. Her heart cracked open. She pulled him close, knowing that for the first time in years, there were no walls between them. But the world outside their door wasn't ready to let them heal in peace. Within days, news spread beyond family and church. A distant cousin posted about Elaine's wealth on social media, spinning the story into gossip, the poor widow sitting on 100 million. Strangers debated her choices. Some praised her. Others sneered, accusing her of deceit, of arrogance. The cruelest comments were aimed at Marcus, mocking his sexuality, his race, his right to exist in their version of America. Marcus tried not to read them, but the words still reached him. Elaine saw the toll it took. She knew money couldn't buy silence, but it could buy something else. Opportunity. So she made a decision. We're leaving for a while, she told Marcus one evening. A change of air. You deserve to see a world that isn't just judgment and cruelty. They traveled to the coast, staying in a small house she owned under one of her companies. For the first time in months, Marcus smiled without flinching, running along the shore, his laughter carried by the wind. Elaine watched him, her chest aching with pride and sorrow. It was during those days by the sea that Marcus met Adrian. Adrian was 17, the son of immigrants, with olive skin and eyes full of restless fire. He was bold where Marcus was cautious, loud where Marcus was quiet. They met at a bookstore cafe, both reaching for the same battered copy of Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. Their fingers brushed, and Marcus's face went scarlet. Adrian only grinned. You like Baldwin? He asked. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Good, Adrian said. Then you're worth knowing. What began as coffee turned into long walks, late-night talks, secret glances that grew bolder with each passing day. Elaine noticed the light in her son's eyes, the way he hummed under his breath again, the way he dared to dream out loud. And for the first time, she felt hope bloom, hope that maybe love could do what money never could. But shadows lingered. Adrian's father disapproved, not only of his son's queerness but of his closeness with a black boy. The words were harsh, the arguments explosive. Marcus watched Adrian return from home with bruises in his spirit, if not on his skin. I don't care what he says, Adrian muttered one night, pacing the sand. I'm not hiding who I am. Not anymore. Marcus hesitated, fear gnawing at him. What if he never accepts us? What if it gets worse? Adrian stopped, staring at him with blazing eyes. Then we'll make our own family. We'll find people who love us as we are. Isn't that what your mom did? Marcus swallowed hard, but he nodded. For the first time, he believed it. Elaine watched from the porch, unseen, tears in her eyes. She saw her son learning courage, saw him choosing love over fear. And she knew the battles ahead would be brutal, but he was not alone anymore. The next chapter of their lives began not with triumph but with confrontation. When they returned home, family awaited. Thomas, Naomi, the cousins all gathered, demanding explanations, demanding shares, demanding allegiance. They spoke of betrayal, of inheritance, of blood rights. Elaine listened, then stood. Her voice rang clear. You see my money and think it's yours. But it is not. I built it. I protected it. And I will use it for what matters me son's future, his safety, his joy. If you cannot stand beside him as he is, then you have no claim to us, no matter what flows in your veins. Thomas's face purpled with rage. You're choosing him over family? I'm choosing love over hate, she replied. Marcus stepped forward then, shoulders squared, voice steady. And I'm choosing myself. If you can't accept me, then I don't need you. The words stunned the room. For once, Elaine didn't have to shield him. He was shielding himself. In that silence, something shifted. Not everyone softened, but a few eyes lowered, ashamed. Naomi, who had been Elaine's fiercest critic, whispered, Maybe we've been wrong. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And as Elaine looked at her son, his chin lifted. His eyes steady, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they could carve a new path. Not through wealth, not through fear, but through truth and through love. For the first time in years, she felt lighter. For the first time, she believed hope was real. Hope was fragile, but it was enough to spark something inside Elaine. She no longer wanted to keep her life in the shadows. For too long, she had lived divided, one self for her family, one self for the world, and a truer self locked away with her wealth. Now, with Marcus stepping into his truth, she realized she had no right to keep hiding hers. The reckoning began in public. A local newspaper picked up the story, twisting the facts into something sensational. Widow conceals fortune while family struggles. Strangers pointed fingers. Friends turned cold. Reporters waited outside her modest home, asking questions that cut like knives. At first, Elaine recoiled, wanting to slam the door and vanish. But then she looked at Marcus, standing at her side with his shoulders squared, and she knew they couldn't run. One morning, she called a press conference, not to justify herself, but to take control of her story. She stood on the steps of a community center, a plain navy dress on her body, her son at her side. Cameras flashed. The crowd hushed. I have been silent for too long, she began. Yes, I have wealth. Yes, I kept it hidden. Not because I am ashamed of success, but because I wanted to know who I was without it. I wanted my son to know dignity that no dollar could buy. But I was wrong to let that silence shield prejudice. I was wrong to let my family, my church, my community believe that they could diminish my son without consequence. She reached for Marcus's hand. He squeezed it, his chin high. This is my son, Marcus. He is gay. He is black. He is worthy of love, respect, and a future as bright as any of yours. If my wealth means anything, it will mean this. No child will grow up thinking they are broken because of who they are or who they love. From this day forward, I will use my resources to build safe spaces, to fund scholarships, to create opportunities where dignity is not optional but guaranteed. The crowd erupted, some with applause, some with jeers. But Elaine stood tall. For the first time, she felt free. In the weeks that followed, the storm intensified. Some relatives severed ties completely, too consumed by bitterness to forgive. Others returned, humbled by Marcus's courage, offering tentative apologies. The church split down the middle, half condemning, half awakening. Elaine didn't chase either side. She poured her energy into action. She established a foundation, its first mission to support LGBTQ+ youth of color. She spoke at schools, at rallies, at churches that welcomed her voice. She donated to shelters, funded mental health programs, partnered with activists who had long been shouting into the void. and she brought Marcus with her every step of the way. It wasn't easy. Hate didn't vanish with money or speeches. Marcus still faced cruelty. Adrian still battled his father's rejection. Elaine still felt the sting of siblings who wouldn't return her calls. But now there was light cutting through the shadows. One evening, months later, Marcus stood in front of a crowd at a youth center opening funded by his mother's foundation. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. When I came out, I thought I'd lose everything. I thought my family would never love me again, that the world would never accept me. And some of that was true. I did lose people. I did hear hate. But what I learned is that love doesn't disappear when people walk away. It grows stronger in the ones who stay. He looked at his mother, his voice breaking. My mom stayed. She fought for me. And now, I want to fight for others the way she fought for me. Tears glistened in Elaine's eyes. She clapped with the rest of the room, pride flooding her chest. Later that night, as they walked home, Marcus turned to her. You know, I used to wish you'd told me about the money sooner. But now I get it. It wasn't the money that saved me. It was you. And maybe it's not about who respects us because we're rich, or who hates us because we're different. Maybe it's just about building a world where respect isn't something we have to earn at all. Elaine smiled through her tears. That's exactly it, baby. That's exactly it. Adrian joined them then, slipping his hand into Marcus's. Elaine noticed, but said nothing. Instead, she reached out and held both their hands, the three of them walking together down a street lit with possibility. The final confrontation came months later, not in a courtroom or at a protest, but in the living room of Naomi's house. The family had gathered again, smaller this time, fractured but still tied by blood. Tension hung thick. Thomas sat in the corner, arms crossed, his glare unyielding. Naomi looked weary, torn between pride and shame. Elaine stood with Marcus beside her. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to tell you this. My son will not hide. I will not hide. If that means we lose you, then so be it. But I hope it doesn't. Because family should mean more than fear. Family should mean love. Naomi's lip trembled. She looked at Marcus, then at Elaine. Slowly, she stood and crossed the room. I don't know if I understand everything, but I don't want to lose you, either of you. She hugged them. It wasn't full reconciliation. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Thomas left without a word. And maybe that was the point. Some people would never change. Some bridges would never rebuild. But the ones that mattered most would hold. Years later, Elaine would look back on that season of her life as the time when everything fell apart and then remade itself stronger. Her wealth no longer felt like a burden because it was no longer a secret. Her son no longer felt like a target because he had found his voice. And together they had turned pain into purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus sat with her on the porch. He was older now, taller, more sure of himself. Adrian was part of their lives, woven into their daily rhythms. The foundation had grown, touching lives far beyond their city. Mom, Marcus said softly, do you ever regret it? Hiding the money all those years. Elaine thought for a long moment. I regret the pain it caused you. I regret the silence. But I don't regret testing who people were when they thought I had nothing. Because now I know. And I know who we are too. Marcus leaned against her shoulder. Who are we? She smiled, her arm wrapping around him. We're people who don't need anyone's permission to exist. We're people who turn hate into love, who turn silence into voice. We're a family, and no amount of money could ever matter more than that. The night was quiet around them, the stars sharp and clear. For once, Elaine felt no weight pressing on her chest, no secret clawing to escape. She was free. Marcus was free. And though the world outside still burned with prejudice, she believed, truly believed, that hope had taken root. The story didn't end in perfect peace. There would always be battles. There would always be hate. But there would also always be love, louder and stronger. A love that grew each time they chose one another over fear. Elaine closed her eyes, resting her head against her son's. She thought of her late husband, of the promises they had made, of the future they had dreamed for Marcus. She thought of the girl she once was, scrubbing floors, told she would never amount to anything. She thought of the woman she became, hiding wealth to protect herself, and the mother she finally learned to be, fearless, unashamed. Her chest swelled, and she whispered into the night, a prayer, a promise, a truth at last revealed, "We are enough." Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.